All right, appreciate it. And I love having an intimate group of people to talk to because then we can really answer some questions and have some fun. So, the title of my lecture is How to Be Better in Bed. Just a little bit of information on me. So, I have a PhD in clinical psychology, and I'm double board certified in clinical psychology as well as clinical sleep disorders. I'm one of 168 people in the world who have passed the sleep medicine boards without going to medical school. I've published five books. My latest book is called The Sleeper. It's actually a fiction book where it's a murder mystery about sleep disorders, which is kind of fun. Um, and I have a new book coming out in January, as I was just mentioning, called Sleep, Drink, Breathe. I think wellness has gotten way too complicated. I've been in private practice for about 25 years, so I still see patients actively. And I think that's important because I'm not just a lecturer. I'm actually somebody who's out in the field and fixing people's sleep. And as many of you know, I live in California. So what is sleep? And I mean, like how does it work in the body? The nice part is we don't have to get super duper complicated. So there's your sleep drive and two systems: sleep drive, sleep rhythm. So sleep drive is a lot like hunger, right? So I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I'm hungry. I eat something and that hunger begins to dissipate. Same holds true with sleep. When a cell eats a piece of glucose, something comes out the back end. One of those things is called adenosine. Adenosine, by the way, is the A in ATP, in case you're curious. But adenosine works its way through your system, gets to a very specific receptor site in your brain, and then accumulates. And as we get more of this adenosine in our system, we get sleepier and sleepier and sleepier. But that's only half of the battle. The other half of the battle is our rhythm or our circadian rhythm, which is kind of the thing that I'm most known for. And kind of similar to hunger, you get hungry around breakfast time, around lunchtime, and around dinner time. Same holds true with sleep. Most people, at least here in North America, have a tendency to get sleepy somewhere between 10 and 11, 11:30 at night. And so when your sleep drive is high and your sleep rhythm is in sync, you sleep. But if either one of these is off, that's when you get what I call a sleep disorder. Now, before we get into much more, we need to break down sleep into the various stages just so that we kind of understand what it is. And we call this sleep architecture. So from the graph that you can see right here, which is kind of interesting, the orange represents the time that you're awake. Then you drop down into light sleep, which is represented by the gray bars, or what is known formally as stage 1 and stage 2 sleep. Then you move into deep sleep, which is now known as stage 3, 4 sleep. And then you move back into the gray, and then you move on into REM sleep, which is represented here by the light blue. That little dance maneuver has to happen in that order, and it continues to go that way, but the amounts of the sleep vary across the night. So as you can see from this thing right here, you can see that deep sleep is front loaded. It's much more deep sleep in the beginning of the night, and then towards the end of the night, there's less. Whereas there's REM seems to be spread throughout the night. And then we see that the light sleep seems to get more and more as we move towards the back half of the night. Now, you're probably saying, okay, that's in and of itself kind of interesting, but Michael, why should I care? Let me tell you, stages 3 and 4, which is considered deep sleep, this is the wake up and feel great sleep. This is your physical restoration. This is where you get all of the dinks and the dents and the scratches in your body car pulled out in the middle of the night, and you start out with a fresh new car every morning. Your blood pressure drops, respiration slows. By the way, this is really what we would consider to be beauty sleep. Like if you've ever heard that term beauty sleep, this is it. And the reason is that during this particular stage of sleep is where we see the largest bolus of something called growth hormone emitted. So growth hormone is kind of like the holy grail for longevity. Growth hormone actually causes cellular repair. So it fixes cells in your body. You want as much growth hormone as you possibly can. And the more deep sleep you have, the more growth hormone you have. There's also something else that happens interestingly there, and that is that something called the glymphatic system has been discovered. And during this stage of sleep, it comes in and it scoops out all of these excess proteins that are left wandering around your brain. Now, you might be wondering, Michael, why do I have proteins wandering around in my brain? So your cells send food, send energy, send all of these things up to the brain, and then there's some byproducts. These byproducts are these proteins that end up floating around. If it gets too crowded in there, the proteins will wrap around a nerve. Two proteins in particular we're talking about, beta amyloid and tau. These proteins, when they wrap around the nerve, That's called Alzheimer's disease. We want to avoid that in every single person that we possibly can. So getting more stage 3, 4 sleep is the best thing that you can possibly do. And that has to do with the consistency of your sleep level, as well as not doing a few simple things. I'll explain what those are in just a second. REM sleep is the other big stage of sleep that you want to know more about. So REM, which stands for rapid eye movement sleep, is a very interesting stage of sleep. And this is your mental restoration. This is where you move information from your short-term memory to your long-term memory, sort of creating an organizational substructure in your head, kind of like a filing cabinet. So you got to remember, is data is coming in through your eyes, through your ears, your nose, and your mouth all day long. If your brain wants to capture that data and be able to retrieve it and use it later, like when you want to ride a bicycle or answer a question or something like that, it's got to store the information. That storing of information appears to occur during REM sleep. Now, there's something else that occurs during REM sleep. And there's a point in time where your muscles become completely and totally paralyzed. You might be saying, that doesn't sound good. Why on earth would we want our muscles to become completely and totally paralyzed? Well, this is so that we don't act out our dreams. Now, this might sound crazy. Like, Michael, are there really people out there that act out their dreams? You'd be shocked. There are. I've seen a patient. I'll tell you a little bit. I'm going to digress for a second, Dave, and tell people some patient stories that I think people will find interesting. So I had a patient back when I was in Georgia who was a hunter. And I'm from Sandy Springs, Georgia, which is a small area just outside Atlanta. And when you're a hunter, you know that if you shoot a doe and you don't kill it, you either have to slit its throat or crack its neck, right? It's like the most humane thing to do. So this gentleman woke up with his wife's head ready to crack her neck. I see your stepmother has got a big eyes on this one. I see you there, Pat. It was so true. He almost killed his wife. Now, the first question that everybody always asks me, is she alive? That's the first question. Good news, he did not kill her. No lives have been spared to tell this story. The second question that I always get asked, are they still married? She is a patient woman. I'm going to give her that. We found one medication that would keep him in one place, not moving, and doing just fine. So the good news is everybody is safe. Nobody is sorry on this one, but there is something called REM behavior disorder, which turns out to be a very important disease. Now, here's where it got fascinating. In about 35% of cases of REM behavior disorder, it's actually a precursor for Parkinson's disease. And in this particular case, it was. And so we were able to, 10 years before we saw any type of Parkinson's symptomatology, identify his sleep disorder, fix his sleep disorder, and set him on a path where we could lower those symptoms over time. So it really turned out to be this window into somebody's health. And I like to think of sleep like that. A lot of people are like, I sleep, my body does it for me. I wake up the next day, I should be okay. There's a lot of stuff that has to go on and has to be done well in order for this to all happen. Also, by the way, there's something else that seems to occur during REM sleep, dreaming. So that is kind of the cool, fun aspect of our unconscious world. But what we think is the transfer of information from our short-term memory to our long-term memory, that process is actually what our mind sees as a dream. So that's part of the reason why dreams are kind of funky, kind of funny, kind of weird. Like certain things seem to happen during dreams that don't seem to happen in other types of stages of our lives. That's because we are actually processing information and emotion. I just started working with a group of patients with nightmares. It's not something that I've ever done in my career. And I'm learning a new therapeutic technique. And what we've discovered is that when they wake up from their nightmare, they stop processing their emotions. And that's part of the reason that the nightmares become repetitive, is because they never get a chance to process through these emotions. I've been working with in one group, a group of veterans who had post-traumatic stress disorder from being in an active theater of war. Kind of makes sense when you start to think about it that way. So what we're starting to learn here is that dreams and dreaming can have tremendous effects on our sleep, and it's definitely something to think about. Now, a big question that people always ask is, well, Michael, why do we even need sleep? Like, do you have a specific answer? Believe it or not, unfortunately, I don't. But what I can tell you is that if we don't get sleep, a whole host of things happen. Number one, our brain gets messed up. We become irritable, memory problems, increased stress, lack of focus. Our gut becomes impaired. We get upset stomachs, irritable bowel syndrome, stuff like that. Our heart can be have all kinds of problems. We get a lowered heart rate variability. Remember, HRV is one of those things we want to see rise, not lower. You also have an increased risk of stroke or even death. And then we see an increase in reaction time. You actually go slower when you're sleep deprived, not faster. So as you can tell, sleep affects every organ system and every disease state. Literally everything you do better with a good night's rest. What I thought I would do is infuse some kind of questions that I've gotten throughout the years that I think everybody here might find interesting. One of the big questions that I get asked is, can you make up for lost sleep? For example, if you get 6 hours one night and 10 the next, does that equate to 2 hours of 8? No, it doesn't. When we're trying to figure out how much sleep do we actually need, it appears as though it changes as our bodies progress in age. So when we've got the newborns, 0 to 3 months, they're just sleeping all the time for 2 real reasons. Number one, super duper brain development. Number two, super duper body development, right? And so lots and lots of stuff is kind of going on there. But what you'll notice is as we get throughout the years, turning to adults and then older adults, there's a range. I want to be super duper clear here. 8 hours is a myth. Let me say it one more time. 8 hours is a myth. Okay, you don't have to get exactly 8 hours. And to be fair, I don't think I've gotten 8 hours in a very long time myself, and I'm the sleep doctor. Okay, so at the end of it all, what you want to do is you want to go to bed when you're tired, wake up when you're ready to wake up. And by the way, I'm going to give you some hints on how to do that based on your genetics in just a moment. But you want it to be consistent. The consistency is what is really the most important thing. And what you will discover is as you are more and more consistent with your bedtime, you actually require less sleep. So I go to bed around midnight. I wake up around 6:15, 6:30. I'm 55 years old, and I've never slept this well in my life, okay? And I've always been a night owl, but it's that layer of consistency that seems to work. Every single night doesn't have to be exactly the same in terms of amount, but if you can wake up at the same time every day, it will cause a level of consistency in your life that will be so much better for you in the long run. Now, a lot of people like to say, well, okay, I get it, Michael. I know what the stages are. I know how the systems work. Now I'm starting to understand a little bit more about that. What actually causes people to have disrupted sleep? Well, number one, a sleep disorder could, right? So apnea, narcolepsy, restless leg syndrome, even some forms of insomnia or sleepwalking. These are formal sleep disorders. There are about north of 6,000 doctors in the United States that can treat all of these. They are board certified in sleep disorders, the same as I am, and they go after these disorders. And to be fair, most sleep doctors, you never get a chance to meet them. It's kind of funny. My wife always says, when we go to parties, she's like, you wouldn't be nearly as interesting if you were a cardiologist, Michael. But being a sleep doctor, one of the things that happens is everybody's got a question about sleep. And it's interesting to me because here's the weird situation is the only time most people get a chance to speak to a sleep doctor is when they're in their office and we've already thought that they might have a sleep disorder. That's too late. I want to catch people before they've got the sleep disorder when they've got what I call disordered sleep. So disordered sleep is I'm doing kind of most of the right stuff. I go back to that room in the back of the house. I'm there for 6, 7, 8 hours. I still come out and I feel awful. Michael, help me with that. That area is something that very few people have studied, but I've kind of dedicated a lot of my career to now understanding and helping people with that because quite frankly, there's a heck of a lot more of those people out there than people who just have sleep disorders. Now, what is disordered sleep? It could be fatigue. Now, fatigue and sleepiness turn out to be two completely different things. Sleepiness is, I can't keep my eyes open, whereas fatigue is like, oh, I don't feel like moving very much. Those are very different things. There's daytime sleepiness, lack of energy, pain can absolutely cause sleep problems. But here's the big one, not sleeping within something called your chronotype. So I'm going to explain to you what chronotypes are, but these are the types of questions that I get asked when it comes to this area. So how do you reset your body clock to wake up time? Most nights I wake up around 4:30 and never seem to fall back asleep. How much time should one allow from logging off at work until bedtime? At what point does waking up early and losing sleep for the sake of a workout become a problem? All of these questions can be answered very simply by knowing what your chronotype is. Now, I keep mentioning this word chronotype, and you might not have heard of that word before, but you have heard of the concept. If anybody has ever called you an early bird or a night owl, those are chronotypes. It's actually based on two specific hormones, when cortisol rises and when melatonin rises. So for early birds, what we see is melatonin falls early, cortisol rises early. For night owls, we see melatonin stays on board, starts later and stays on board later, and then offsets later. So this is how we determine an early bird versus a night owl. Here's the funny thing. I got patients who don't fall into either category. Some people fall in the middle, and some people are just messed up with insomnia. So I was trying to figure out, how do I categorize these people so I can figure out a better way to treat them? So I developed a 4 chronotype system that I'm going to explain to you right now. The first one is I replaced all of the birds, because quite honestly, I'm a mammal, not a bird. And I wanted to be able to be associated with an animal that I thought was kind of cool. Now, looking at this animal, these animals actually follow these bedtimes. So early bird turns into a lion. Lions, look, who wouldn't want to be the king or queen of the jungle, right? These are my early morning optimists. They have a medium sleep drive. These are usually the COOs of my company. These are the folks that you get an email from at 6:30 in the morning. They go into work and they make a list every day, and they go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 to step 4. They do prioritize health and fitness, but to be fair, it's not always fun being a lion, because most of them have been up since 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. So dinner and a movie is out for a lion. I mean, if you want to be social, lion's not your thing. By the way, these are genetic. You don't actually get to choose them. They happen to you. So understanding what is in your genetics is the name of the game here. Lions make up about 15% of the population. Bears, also called hummingbirds, or is that group in the middle. These make up 55% of the population. 1 in 2 people is a bear. To be honest with you, I really wish I was a bear. I'm not, I'm a wolf, and I'll explain to you what that is in a second. But bears, all of society is built around a bear's schedule. Bears have a tendency to wake up around 7, go to bed around 10:30, very healthy sleep drive, but this is the glue for society. I mean, these are usually somewhat extroverted. They can be introverted, but very fun, enjoyable people. These are the folks that invite you to their home for dinner, that kind of thing. Again, they make up the majority of the society. Now we've got wolves, or night owls. That's the category that I have historically fallen into. About 10 to 15% of us, we are the late night creative. So this is where I see my actors, my musicians, my architects, my artists, people like that who have a lot of creativity. It's kind of interesting when you think about it. Like, if you know any creatives, like, when do they usually get their inspiration? It's usually not at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, right? They've seen something on TV. They've become inspired because they're up. These people crave novelty, and they can be very high risk takers. Oddly enough, they have a tendency to be socially introverted. I personally am not very socially introverted. I would call myself more of an extrovert, but many of the wolves are. And these people are very loyal friends. The new category are the dolphins. Now, I want to be clear. So far, I haven't really told you much new. Lions and early birds, same thing. Wolves and night owl, same thing. Hummingbirds and bears, same thing. So we're all on the same page in that we've got this idea set together. There's a 4th group. This is what I've discovered. And by the way, this is genetic as well. I call them dolphins. The reason I call them dolphins is because they sleep unihemispherically. So half of their brain is asleep while the other half is awake and looking for predators. So I feel like it's kind of like my insomniacs, right? They're just never quite asleep. They have very erratic sleep schedules, but they crave longer bouts of sleep. Usually they've diagnosed themselves as insomniacs, and they're very intelligent people. They do have a tendency to be a little on the OCD side, but they're a lot of fun to work with. But their sleep is really messed up. And I wrote an entire book just to help them with their overall sleep. Now, once you've decided that your sleep is kind of interesting, do you need to go to a doctor? Do you need to learn up what your chronotype is? Like, what's the next step here, Michael? Here are the signs and symptoms on the left-hand side where you want to go talk to a doctor. You don't want to read a book about it. You want to actually see somebody. And this is really the signs and symptoms of something called sleep apnea. So you see disrupted breathing, excessive sleepiness, sometimes headaches in the morning. All of these symptoms that you see over here on the left are definitely things that we know from a medical standpoint are important. Now, a lot of times people will say to me, Michael, I got to be honest with you. I don't want to go get a sleep study. I don't want to spend the night in a hospital. I don't want to do all that stuff. I don't want wires all attached to me. I sleep just fine. It's my bed partner who says I don't sleep so well. Let me explain. If somebody has undiagnosed sleep apnea, all the things on the right are what you are in store for. You will eventually get heart failure, heart disease, obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, stroke, depression, maybe even ADD, ADHD. All of these things come with undiagnosed sleep apnea. So if you even have two of the symptoms on the left-hand side, you probably want to do a sleep test. Now, let's talk about sleep tests for just a second, because quite honestly, they've changed quite a bit. In fact, since COVID, we now have portable sleep tests that are so much easier. It used to be you'd have to go to your primary care doctor, they'd refer you to a sleep lab, then you'd see a sleep doctor, then you'd have to go into the laboratory, you'd spend the night in the hospital, you'd have a video camera on you, 27 electrodes all over your body. I mean, let's be fair, who can sleep during that, all of that nonsense, right? Now, you can go to a website, you click on it, you can do a Zoom teledoc session where you're talking with a physician. They can send you a disposable sleep study in the mail. It comes, you wear it on your wrist with a little clamp on your finger, no needles, no pain whatsoever. You push the on button, you wake up the next day, you push the off button. It literally sends the data to your phone. The phone sends the data to the cloud. In 24 hours, you're on screen talking with the doctor who's seen your data and can give you a diagnosis. You never even have to leave your house. It's unbelievable now how available these things are. So many of the hurdles have actually come down for sleep apnea. Now, why am I hyping up sleep apnea so much? Because so many people have it and we know that it's undiagnosed. We think for men, it's somewhere around 18% of men. Guys, that's 1 in 5 of us. Okay, for women, it's actually a little bit lower. We think it's around 12% for women, but once women hit menopause, that number is even with men. So this is something that's real. It's something to think about. And there are several different types. Obstructive sleep apnea is where there's actually a blockage in your throat. So maybe your tonsils, your adenoids are in the way. Maybe you have a really big tongue. Something physical is blocking your airway. And when you lie back to fall asleep, all the anatomy falls to the back of your throat, and boom, your air is cut off. There's a second form that's called central sleep apnea. So this is where your brain tells your lungs, don't breathe. That's much more serious. That's much more difficult to treat. But again, something important to identify. So if we identify it, there's a whole different route to take for treating something like that. But the main treatment is something called a CPAP machine. So this is a machine, a mask that you wear on your face that pushes air down your throat. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. It's not a lot of fun to wear a CPAP machine, okay? I've tried it. I have a lot of patients on it. And for many of my patients, I might say things to them like, hey, try wearing it for a week while you're watching television to get used to it, things like that. But here's the truth of the matter is CPAP works 99% of the time. That doesn't mean it's the right treatment for everybody, but we know that it works on the majority of people. So what I have a lot of my patients do is I say, look, there are many options. There's weight loss. There's something called an oral appliance. This is like a dental guard, which is an upper and a lower, and the lower is slightly pulled forward just by about 2 millimeters, which opens up your posterior airway space and allows you to breathe better. So no mask on the face, instead, mouth guard, that's one option. Other options are surgical. Now, to be fair, I'm not a big fan of surgery, but there are some very mild surgeries that can be highly, highly effective when it comes to sleep apnea. So again, this is something that people should take note of. If you think you or your partner could have it, it's a quick overnight sleep study that's sent to your house. By the way, the cost on that is less than $200. It's unbelievable. So you can actually get this done for less than $200, answer the question yourself, and be in good shape. Now, here's one of the most popular questions that I get. I often find that I wake up at the same time every night, around 2:30 in the morning, and I can be up for 15 minutes to 2 hours. What is the reason for that, Michael? So we know that a lot of people can suffer from something called insomnia, right? Insomnia is a host of these types of symptoms, but most people think of insomnia as not able to fall asleep. In fact, the most popular form of insomnia is the not being able to stay asleep. And I'm going to explain a little bit about how that works. And so at night, your core body temperature rises until it hits a peak at around 10:30, and then it drops. When it drops, it actually sends a signal to your brain to release melatonin. Then what happens is your core body temperature drops. At some point, it's got to turn up, because if it doesn't, you'll freeze to death. So what happens is your core body temperature starts to rise. When it rises, you move into a lighter stage of sleep, and it's very easy to wake up. Guess what time that happens to everybody? Between 1 and 3 o'clock in the morning. Every single person on Earth wakes up at that period of time. However, they might not realize it, because you have to be awake for almost a full 60 seconds to even know that you're awake. So what happens is most people rise to the level of awakening, roll and turn over this way or roll and turn over that way, and go right back to sleep. The problem comes when somebody grabs the clock and takes a look at it. They instantly do the mental math, and then they say, oh no, it's 3 o'clock in the morning and I've got to get up by 6. Sleep, sleep, sleep. And you try to force yourself to sleep. I got to be honest with you, in the history of time, no one has ever been able to force themselves to sleep. Because what you're doing is you're elevating your heart rate because you're anxious about not sleeping. And in fact, what we want you to do is lower your heart rate. The single most effective way to get somebody who's awake in the middle of the night to get back to sleep is to lower their heart rate to below 60. That allows them to enter into a state of unconsciousness much easier. But as a general guideline, there's a lot of different things that I use to help people with insomnia. The first one is called a sleep diary. So it's exactly what it sounds like. You put in what time you went to bed, how long you think it took you to fall asleep, maybe 5 or 8 questions. You fill it out every morning. I get a baseline of that. Then I start to schedule your bedtime, usually based on your chronotype. So as an example, let's take Diamond Dave here, and let's say that he was normally going to bed at 9 o'clock, right? And was having multiple awakenings throughout the night and then waking up at 6. Right? So he would have shown me this on his sleep diary, and then I would say, hey, Dave, here's what I want you to do. I think you're actually more of a night owl, so I want you to stay up not to 9, not to 10, but to 10:30 or 11 o'clock. And I still want you to get up at 7. And then he's going to be like, oh, Michael, I don't think I can do that. I'm like, promise me. And I force him to do it. And guess what? Now his body knows when to sleep because of that level of consistency. So these are the types of techniques that we like to use before we get to things like pharmaceuticals, right? Because here's the big problem is if I give him a pill to sleep, now we have 2 problems. We have a sleep problem and we have a pill problem, right? And that's really not the place that we want to go if we can help it. I want to be super clear about one thing. If you need a pill to sleep, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, if you and your doctor have come to the point in time where based on your medical diagnoses, let's say you have pain, let's say you have emphysema, let's say you have schizophrenia, whatever it is you've got, if you and your doctor have come to the conclusion that a sleeping pill would be helpful for you moving forward, you should take it. So the way I think about it is kind of like this, a little bit like blood pressure. So a lot of people can eat right, exercise, but they still have high blood pressure because of genetics. So they have to take a pill to keep their blood pressure normal. I kind of think of insomnia as the same thing. If you're doing all the right things, you've scheduled your bedtime, you've figured out your chronotype, you're not having too much caffeine, like all the things that we've been talking about here, and you're still not sleeping, it's okay for you to use a medication. Now, in many cases, what I personally like to do is we'll use the medication to break the cycle of insomnia. Then I teach them all these things, and then we slowly taper them off so we get the drug off of them. The problem comes when many physicians out there just write a prescription and say, come back in 60 days and tell me how it's going. And you have no real information other than I'm supposed to take this pill every night for 60 days. Then what am I supposed to do? So my job is really to get people through that part of it and understand more. And these are some of the different things that I'll use. Maybe it's electronic curfew. We've talked a little bit about supplementation like magnesium and omegas and vitamin D. Then I also do something called the power down hour. And I'm going to go into a little detail on that. But basically, I break up the last hour into 3 20-minute segments. So that way you can do what you need to do. So the first 20 minutes are just stuff that you have to get prepared for the next day, 20 minutes for hygiene, and then 20 minutes for some form of meditation, relaxation, prayer, whatever gets you there. Now, I'm going to go into, since this is such a big issue for so many people, what I thought I would do is give you an exact plan of what to do if you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't get back to sleep. Step number one, don't go to the bathroom. You're now wondering, what the heck am I talking about? So most people, when they wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, here's what they say. Well, I'm up, I might as well pee. Here's the problem. In order to enter into a state of unconsciousness, you need a heart rate of 60 or below. If you go from a lying position to a seated position to a standing position and you walk across your room, guess what? Your heart rate just got jacked up. Number two is if you actually go to the bathroom and you flip on the light, you just told your brain it's morning because it thinks it's sunlight and it stops producing melatonin. Do me a favor and put a strategically placed night light between the bathroom and the bedroom, and then one in the bathroom. So if you do have to get up regularly to go to the bathroom, at least you can go in, not get the stimulus, and come back out. Again, if you got to go to the bathroom, please go to the bathroom. But if you're sitting here saying, well, maybe I got to go, then you don't have to go. Stay where you are. Another thing you can do is stop fluids about an hour, hour and a half before bed. I want to be clear, ask your doctor. You may have to take medication. You may have to do separate things like that. So I want to make sure that you understand fluid before bed is not necessarily bad, but if it is making you wake up to pee, that's kind of where we're going to look at that. So what do I do if I woke up, I went to the bathroom, then I came back? Michael, I got to get my heart rate back down. How on earth do I do this? 4, 7, 8 breathing is one of my favorite all-time techniques. And it's exactly what it sounds like, and it doesn't cost you a dime to do it. So you breathe in slowly for a count of 4, you hold for a count of 7, and you breathe out for a count of 8. What this does is it dumps all the excess carbon dioxide out from your lungs. It allows you to breathe easier, and it immediately drops your heart rate. Between 10 and 12 cycles of this, and you will start to really feel relaxed and being able to breathe. Now, I want to warn you guys, 4, 7, 8 might be something that you have to work towards. I was able to do 4, 6, 7 breathing at first, and then I moved to 4, 7, 8 breathing. So what I did at first was I made the hold one less and the breathing out one less just to get used to it for myself, and then I increased those. But you can do it any way you want. Now, externally, again, what are the different things that you can do to make your life a little bit better? I already talked about installing night lights between the bedroom and the bathroom. Do me a favor, put your phone away. So many people say, I use my phone next to my bedside, and if somebody needs me for an emergency, I have to have it. That is the biggest bunch of BS I've ever heard, okay? Number one, nobody's calling you in the middle of the night. You know that, and I know that. Number two, you can still leave the ringer on. I'm just saying move it across the room. Put it into the bathroom. And here's why. The second you wake up, you'll instantly grab it and you'll look at the clock. Then you do the mental math, and now you're in trouble because you're anxious, because you're awake. That is not what you need to do. Now, I will tell you that for some people, when all else fails, it's okay to get up and do something a little bit different, but make sure that it's relaxing and non-stimulating. So don't go watch the next episode of Game of Thrones on Netflix, okay? That's not going to put you to sleep. But maybe being in another room, meditating or reading some Bible passages or some type of prayer, or again, something to slow you down is going to be a great way to make sure that this insomnia isn't something that catches up to you. So what I thought I would do quickly is run you through how I work with patients so you could sort of see a behind the scenes of what goes on. So this is my typical patient. I'm calling him the exhausted executive. This is John. He's 45 years old. He snores, especially when he drinks alcohol, but no observed apneas. We did a home sleep test on him. He had no sleep disorders. So he was in the disordered sleep category, not in the sleep disorders category. So this was the guy that we wanted to look at. So what did I do first? Blood work. Turns out that he was low in iron, normal, but low in testosterone. He was deficient in vitamin D and magnesium, and his melatonin was stable. I now know so much about this person just by doing a little bit of groundwork of doing a sleep study if he needed it and getting the blood work. Now, I personally do genetic testing on all of my patients. This is very, very new for sleep, and it's kind of more in the experimental range. But what it does do is it tells me quite a few things about my average individual. So for this person, it told me that they had no tendency to get narcolepsy, apnea, or insomnia, but they did have the genes for restless leg syndrome. Also note before in the blood work, they have low iron. One of the things we know is people with low iron end up with RLS. So maybe we're going to look at supplementation for his iron to avoid something called restless leg syndrome. We learned that his chronotype is an early one. Again, he is a lion, that the quality is genetically reduced. And look at this, the quantity is only 6 to 7.5 hours. So this person, genetically speaking, isn't going to ever sleep more than 7.5 hours. So again, the 8-hour myth is gone. So what supplements do you recommend for better sleep? Are supplements like magnesium a good idea for sleep? Or are they actually more harmful because people become too dependent? Let's take a look at what I did with him. Still going through the evaluation process, looked at his mattress, 12 years old. Probably not the best idea there. Pillows, 3 years old. Once again, probably time to get a new one. He also had excessive light after 8 p.m. He had a theater room in his house, and he would play a movie almost every single night and fall asleep watching. I mean, it was literally not a big screen TV. It was a theater room. So we knew that wasn't good for him. Also, he slept with a pet in the bed. Now, I do that as well, so that's probably not the worst thing in the universe. But again, all things to evaluate to understand what the disruption is. What was his self-report? He falls asleep in under 5 minutes. Now, you would think that would probably be good, right? Nope. That's actually a sign of sleep deprivation. If people can lie down and fall asleep like right when their head hits the pillow, that is an early sign of sleep deprivation, and it's not necessarily a good thing. He wakes 2 to 3 times a night to urinate. He's up for 20 to 40 minutes at 2 a.m. He'll have 2 to 3 cups of caffeine a day. Exercise is occasional, and his nutrition is grab and go. So what did I do to help him? Well, we know he's got low iron, and we know he has a genetic propensity for restless leg syndrome. So I started him on 325 milligrams of iron sulfate, FeSO4, which costs a grand total of $8 at Walgreens. Okay, so this is not a heavy thing. Then we began giving him magnesium using what I call banana tea. So bananas are a wonderful source of magnesium and potassium, and a great thing to help with your sleep. One of the things that you can do instead of taking a fistful of pills is to actually take an organic banana, wash it off, cut off the tip and the stem, cut it in half. All I've done so far is washed off a banana and cut it in half with the peel still on the banana. Turns out the peel has 3 times the amount of magnesium as the fruit itself. Take these 2 things, drop them into some boiling water for about 4 minutes and boil the banana. And then you drink the water. You don't eat the banana because it's total mush, but you drink the water. It's loaded with magnesium, potassium. It is a great evening ritual. There's no actual caffeine or tea in it. You got to like bananas because it does taste very banana-ish. But I will tell you something. I've got one mom who pours it into popsicle molds and she gives it to her kids. I've got one person who makes it at the beginning of the week and just uses it all week long. It's an easy lift for getting the right amount of magnesium for you. Also, it's got a lot of fiber, so it actually helps keep you very regular, which as we get older can be an important thing. Also, if you're on any pain medication, it can help with things like constipation. I had him begin vitamin D3, 5,000 international units daily, and we're considering hormone replacement therapy with testosterone. So his testosterone was around 300, which is right at the mark of, quote, low T, but he was definitely starting to feel that could be potentially having an effect on his sleep. We got him a new mattress, the Simmons Beauty Rest Black Hybrid. It was around $2,500. I've done over 150 mattress reviews on my website. So if you're looking for beds, we've developed a system where we can identify what's the best bed for hot sleepers, what's the best bed for side sleepers, what's the best bed for back sleepers, and we do full-on 15-point reviews. So swing over to thesleepdoctor.com if you're thinking about buying a bed, because that's going to be a great resource for you. But generally speaking, you should be able to see beds. $2,500, I would say, is probably on the higher end side of pricing. I think you can find a really good quality product for somewhere between $1,500 and $2,500, no problem. Pillows, definitely want to add a new pillow for this person. Now, here's something interesting is a lot of pillows now are coming with a zipper on the side. So you can remove stuffing and personalize the height, or what we call the loft, of your pillow. I love this idea because it makes it much easier. I also got him some blue blocker glasses because he's watching the movies all night long. And we trained his small dog to sleep at the end of the bed. Now, lots of people are like, Michael, how on earth did you train a small dog to sleep at the end of the bed? Let me tell you. So here's what we did. Went to Walgreens and I bought a heating pad that was about this big. Okay. And I put it right underneath the duvet and I put it on high towards the corner of the bed. Then I took the small dog and we put it on there. We cooled the room down and we put the dog on there so he could start to feel the warmth. And then we moved him away. Then we brought him back 3 or 4 times. Guess what? They wanted the warmth more than they wanted to sleep right on my side. So now he sleeps right down there on the heating pad. He's happy. I'm happy. My wife's happy. Everything works itself out. So you'd be shocked. And if you can just use a little bit of ingenuity, you'd be shocked at how well something like this works. So because he was an early chronotype, here's what we did. He wakes up at 5:30 in the morning naturally. Through his aura ring, we were able to tell how long each sleep cycle was, and I was able to develop a perfect sleep schedule for him. So we knew based on his aura ring that he had 5 sleep cycles at 80 minutes apiece. So roughly 400 minutes of sleep was going to be perfect for him, which is only 6 hours and 40 minutes. So once again, the myth of 8 hours is not true. We gave him a napping schedule if he needed it, and we went forward. Now we started to work on the ways to improve his sleep quality. How do we improve sleep quality? When he wakes up in the morning, it's 12 to 15 ounces of water. Takes his supplements. If it's still dark outside, he gets light in the morning, stretches, and then he does his exercise almost immediately, usually on an empty stomach. He was trying to lose a few pounds, and so doing cardio, fasting cardio can be a great way to do that in the morning. He then takes a cool shower and has his first coffee at 7 a.m. So he wakes up around 5:30 naturally. 90 minutes later is when he has his first coffee, if he even needs it, because now he doesn't really need coffee as much. We've managed his alcohol in the evenings and taught him how to do the power down hour. And here's how he looks. He goes to bed now somewhere around 11, gets up at 5:30. He wakes up without an alarm. No sleep interruptions or awakenings. He doesn't even need caffeine. And he likes to exercise now, somewhere between 30 and 60 minutes. I have him doing progressive muscle relaxation at night. He falls asleep in 10 minutes. And he reports he feels confident, energetic, and ready. So it's kind of cool when you take all of the stuff from the front end of the lecture and you put it into practice into the back end of the lecture. All of a sudden, we start to learn a whole lot about how we can sleep better. But some of that's kind of complicated. So what I decided to do was come up with a 5-step plan that everybody can follow to start and then figure out what they want to do next. So step number 1 is to select one wake-up time and stick to it, hopefully based on your chronotype. Step number 2, stop caffeine by 2 p.m. This will give your body approximately 8 hours to eliminate caffeine, which is about half of the caffeine will come out of your system. Step number 3 is to limit alcohol 3 hours before bed. Notice I didn't say get rid of alcohol altogether. It's okay to have a glass of wine with dinner, but I'm going to be honest with you. If you can avoid it, it's going to really help your sleep. So what I tell people is have 1 glass of wine, 1 glass of water, 1 glass of wine, 1 glass of water. Then stop, wait 3 hours to go to bed, and you are good to go. You can enjoy your adult beverage with your meal, not have it affect your sleep, and enjoy your evening. Again, exercise is the single best way to improve sleep quality, especially as I'm getting into my mid-50s. I'm really making sure that I'm doing this every single day. But if you do it too close to bedtime, your core body temperature heats up and it's really hard to sleep. So limit exercise 4 hours before bed. And then in the morning, I want you to do what I call the 3 15s. So 15 deep breaths, 15 ounces of water, and 15 minutes of sunshine every morning. This turns off the melatonin faucet in your head. And 15 minutes is the exact amount of time required in order for you to get vitamin D going. So with that, I'm opening it up to questions.